and welcome to The World Today on Channels Television. I'm Anne Nwawado right here from Lagos, and here's what's coming up on the program. Floods continue in central Greece following torrential rainfall this week. Niece of Johnny Kitagawa, late J-pop mogul, apologizes for sexual abuses committed by her uncle when he was CEO of the talent agency. Plus, busted Gabonese leader Ali Bongo granted freedom of movement by the junta, citing health concerns. Once again, welcome to the program and thank you for joining us. The floods have continued in Greece following torrential rainfall in the country, and that's after weeks of rising temperatures. One of the outcomes of that is a search ongoing for an Austrian couple missing after the rain swept away the house they were staying in. People in central Greece were trapped on the roofs of their houses after floods set the whole village underwater. The couple had decided to shelter inside the bungalow they had rented for their honeymoon as heavy rain swept through central Greece. But the house in the beach resort of Potiska near Mount Pelion was then washed into the sea by flash floods. The owner of the accommodation, Thanasis Samaras, has said that he and other guests who left for higher grounds and had advised the couple to do the same. The Greek Fire Brigade has a team in the area searching for the missing couple, including other people. And staying with the floods in Greece, as for residents living in that area between Lexonia and Pelion, also in central Greece, it was shocking to see the strength of the river swollen by torrential rains. For many of them, like 53-year-old Valisis Samaras, the sound of the uprooted trees hitting a bridge and damaging a building on the shore felt more like an earthquake. Authorities are saying at least 3 people have died. 4 more are still missing following the impact of Storm Daniel. Heavy rainfall, which comes days after a 2-week deadly wildfire died out in the north. Authorities are now saying it was the most extreme on record. And in other parts of the world, the remnants of Typhoon Haikui drenched China for a 3rd day since making landfall. Images shown on state broadcaster CCTV showed badly flooded roads and waterlogged residential areas as rescue and evacuation efforts continued. Storm Haikui flooded parts of the southeastern Fijian province, forcing 294,100 people to evacuate, inundated 9,949.7 hectares of land and crops, damaging nearly 2,540 homes. Economic losses in the province have reached 5.054 billion yuan, and that's about $690 million as the disaster continues to develop. The storms are expected to continue across China's southwestern regions until the end of this week. A professor at Reading University and climate scientist Hannah Cloak has said the past cannot be undone as climate change is happening and the planet will get hotter, stormier, stronger, and rainfall will even become more intense. She was speaking to Reuters about the recent weather events and the summer for this year, which has been declared as the hottest on record. Well, just last month was the hottest August on record globally and a 3rd straight month in a row to set such a record following the hottest ever June and the month of July. The 3-month period from June through to August surpassed previous records by the large margin with an average temperature of 16.8 degrees Celsius, and that is above average.
We've just seen the warmest August on record globally, and that's following on from the warmest July and the warmest June. We've got climate change right here in our hands. We can see it in these hot temperatures that we've been experiencing. We've seen heat waves, but also marine heat waves. So the ocean has been very, very warm. And of course, all the extremes that come along with that and more energy in the system. So devastating wildfires, intense rainfall as well. So the intense heat that we see in these heat waves and the intense rainfall that we see in some of these strong rainstorms, these are things that we can't get away from now, and they are going to get worse because this is historic. This is things that we have done to the climate in the past. We can't change that. We can't get out of that. But we do still have a choice about the future and how much we change our climate in the future. Some of what we expect next summer will depend on what's happening with El Nino. Certainly, if we continue to see this warm ocean, then we will continue to see some of these really, really extremes coming along. But even without El Nino, we were expecting more hot weather in the summer, changes to rainfall patterns, so heavy rainfall in the summer as well as in the winter because of climate change. What exactly happens next year is difficult to say because weather is difficult to predict. But what we can say for certain is that going into the future over the next years, we expect to see more of these types of events. We can definitely still avoid the worst climate chaos. We are locked into some changes, but exactly how bad it's going to get is up to us. We have agency over this. We can make choices about how we create energy, whether we're burning fossil fuels or not, whether we're pumping those greenhouse gases in or not, preferably. Because that, if we stop doing that, the worst situation won't happen.
Well, we told you earlier about Haikui, which has drenched China for a third day, making landfall. Images showed on state broadcaster CCTV showed badly flooded roads and waterlogged residential areas. Rescue and evacuation efforts have continued in that region.
受此次强降雨影响，这段路有1公里左右积水严重，最深处积水。
Over to the United States, where tourists visiting the capital, Washington, D.C., say they are steering clear of Army of the nation's most popular monuments because of the stifling heat and temperatures expected to reach 38 degrees Celsius this week. The temperatures in Washington, D.C. have been considered a little above normal, and the city has opened several air-conditioned areas, also known as cooling centers, and that's in response to the unreasonably warm weather.
Normal. I have lived here for a long time and this is incredible. Like we are in September waiting for fall to come and suddenly it's 100 degrees outside. So I think it has to be with the global warming.
Walking around here yesterday, just in the full sun, it was, slimy. My body was just very moist and it was hard to get reprieve from that. Even in the shade it just feels.
It seems like things are trending to being hotter and hotter. I think there's definitely an impact that how we've set up our society has kind of impacted things. We're just going to deal with it as best as we can and try and make some changes to our lifestyles to have less impact, of course, as we've been doing for a while now, but it's gonna be tough if this is becoming something that's more regular.
The summers in DC get very hot, so you got to stay hydrated. But with these cooling centers in place, it really helps. It really helps battle the heat.
Let's turn our attention to other stories now. The niece of Johnny Kitagawa, the little J-pop mogul at the center of a sex scandal, has shocked Japan, saying that she has stepped down as the head of the talent agency her uncle had founded. Kitagawa, who died in 2019 at the age of 87, has been accused of sexually abusing hundreds of boys and young men over several decades while heading the most powerful talent agency in Japan's pop music history. But during the news conference carried live by most broadcasters, Kitagawa's niece, who's 57-year-old Julia Kay, bowed deeply, apologizing for the abuses, saying she had stepped down on Tuesday. She also said Noriyuki Higashiyama, who's a former member of the hit 1980s boy band Shonentai, was the new head of that agency. Founded by Kitagawa in 1962, Johnny and Associates have an outsized cultural presence in Japan, producing some of the most popular names of J-pop, including SMAP and Arashi, both with massive fan bases across East Asia. Meanwhile, a group of former talent agency idols who claim to have been sexually abused by Mr. Kitagawa say that they have accepted his niece's apology after she apologized for the abuses committed when her uncle was CEO of the pop agency. The group were members of the Johnny Sexual Assault Victims Association and welcomed the apology but said it could not erase the pain that had happened. They also called for the change of the agency's name to that so that it is no longer contained in the name of Johnny. Mr. Kitagawa, who died in 2019, aged 87, has been accused of sexually abusing hundreds of boys and young men over several decades while heading the most powerful talent agency in Japan's pop music industry. Four suspected high-ranking members of the South Korean Doomsday cult have been arrested in Fiji. Fiji media reports say that they were deported, but a legal injunction prevented the others from being ejected. The Grace Road Church became notorious after 400 of its members moved to Fiji back in 2014, claiming that they will be safe from imminent natural disaster. Its founder, Shin Okaju, was jailed in 2019 for holding followers captive in Fiji and subjecting them to violence. The church has built a business empire after arriving in Fiji, but it denies it is a cult, as well as allegations of abuse. I will tell you earlier about the weather conditions in the United States. Let's hear more from our correspondent in Washington, Maria Bird, who joins us now on The World Today. Hello, Maria.
Hello, good evening.
All right, I hope you're not too hot, but the temperatures in Washington certainly mirror the situation weeks ago. I mean, when people in other cities in the U.S. were actually grappling with rising temperatures, is it usual for the weather to be this hot at this time of the year?
No, and yes, we are. Even technology services, and I've experienced some today, challenges because of the extreme heat. So we're at temperatures that are over 100. Yesterday, which is very unprecedented for this time of year. We're heading to the fall season. So typically temperatures are decreasing quite dramatically during this time of year. But with global warming, we could even foresee temperatures dropping by 20 degrees as of next week, which is very odd for this time of year to have that type of extreme temperature. But it is very hot. It is obviously causing some challenges with many individuals in their homes because typically the air conditioning and things like that are being shut off during this time of year.
But Maria, it seems the U.S. Capitol is already experiencing too much summer. How exactly are people cooling off at the moment?
Well, they are opening cooling centers. The local governments are opening cooling centers. They've also extended the time period of pools being open. But this does create some challenge for some of the schools as well, because some schools do not have efficient air conditioning units to be able to cool at this type of temperature at this time of year.
But I mean, when we're looking at the weather in Greece, many tourist spots were closed when temperatures began to rise. Is that the case in Washington, D.C.? Tourist attractions, I mean, lots of them, the National Mall, Museum, are they still open to tourists? And what provisions have been made for the people to enjoy these attractions while staying cool?
Well, most of the attractions are still open. There's obviously heat advisories because even though we have extremely hot temperatures, what that also means is our heat index and our heat values are even higher, which means it makes it very difficult for people to breathe because we have high humidity as well, which also means that it does create a risk for those who are vulnerable, those who have chronic illnesses or who are elderly or young children. And so that is something that obviously is being a provision being put in place because some of the tourist attractions have very long lines for people to get in. And so that creates a bit of a challenge there as well. And obviously, if there's not appropriate cooling systems in these attractions, they sometimes will have to close early or open later in the day when the temperatures have gone down, or only open early in the day and close for the afternoon hours.
Now, it's been, a roller coaster, we can call that, of weather events in the United States, from the heat wave to typhoons to wildfires. How are Americans reacting to the situation this year, from one very hot weather to another? How are they even taking all of this in?
Well, Americans, I think, are not surprised. We know that global warming has been an issue. We know that climate change is a top priority for the U.S. government and specifically President Biden. And so they're just looking for ways to be able to address this. As you said, we've had wildfires. There's been extreme temperatures and extreme weather conditions that definitely creates a bit of concern. But Americans are just trying to figure out how to grapple through with it and how to move forward despite all of what's been experienced.
Analysts are saying already that climate change is responsible for the change in weather, the harsh ones. Are people living environmentally conscious? Do they ask what they can do to make things better?
Well, I don't know if people are asking what they can do, but there are policies oftentimes being put in place. For example, in California, they had a water policy where you could only water your grass certain times of the day to try to address some of the climate issues there. So they're trying to put policies in place that can address some of these climate change issues. Obviously, moving more towards electric vehicles will help, and putting policies in place to have the U.S., especially states like California, to be 100% electric by a certain time period. Those are ways to try to address it. But as far as the average American, I think they try their best, but is their best really what's going to make dramatic changes and what we need to see as far as the climate change issues?
All right. Thank you very much, Maria Bird, our Washington correspondent. Thanks for your contribution on The World Today, and please keep cool.
Thank you.
Still to come in just a moment after the break. Russia condemns a U.S. decision to supply uranium munitions to Ukraine as the war continues in the country. We'll bring you the details. Please stay with us. Welcome back to other stories now. Activists in Guinea are saying that at least 4 people have died in clashes between protesters and security forces in the country as it marked the 2nd anniversary of the military coup. The forces arrives as an alliance of political parties, trade unions, and civil society groups wants a speedy return to civilian rule, and they reported the deaths of 4 young men aged between 15 and 18 in a statement published on Facebook. It said that 2 of them had been killed in the capital, Conakry, when armed security forces attacked the neighborhoods of political activists on Monday, which is the eve of the planned demonstrations against junta. The other 2 teenagers had been killed on Tuesday, and at least a dozen others suffered bullet wounds. Well, the junta, which had warned people against joining the protests, has not made any comment about this latest incident. And for the junta in Gabon, they say they have ended house arrest for Al-Sadd leader Ali Bongo, saying he is now free to move about. A communique to the effect was read out on Wednesday evening. Military spokesperson Colonel Ulrich said the decision to free Mr. Bongo was due to his state of health. Mr. Bongo had been placed under house arrest since August the 30th, as the military announced it was now in control of the oil-rich country. The decision to free him follows pressure from the Central African Regional Bloc and the Gabon neighbors to respect the physical integrity of the ousted head of state. And Rwandan police have arrested a 34-year-old suspected serial killer who is alleged to have murdered and buried more than 10 bodies in his kitchen. According to the police, more than 10 decomposing bodies have been exhumed and identities of the victims are still unknown. The police found out about the murders when asked to evict him from his house in the district in Kigali for defaulting on rent. The man confessed to luring his victims from bars, robbing them, killing, and then burying them in a hole he had dug up in his kitchen. However, the suspect has not commented in court on the allegations and is yet to be formally charged as investigations continue. Well, let's bring in now legal practitioner and international affairs analyst Yinka Oyenije. Yinka Oyenije joins us from London, and thank you so much for joining us on The World Today.
Thank you for having me as well.
So is this an unusual story coming out of Africa for Rwanda even? What do you make of it?
All right, it's most unfortunate, but looking at the events, I have to go back to the genocide in Rwanda and then now. So unfortunately, it will seem as though that we always have to face these difficult circumstances of killings and all of that. But in this particular situation is a little out of place for a country that is aiming to heal, okay, from the genocide years, for one individual to have killed about 10 people of both gender, both men and women. But news has it that this could be commercial sex workers who he lured into his apartment, robbed them, and then killed them and then buried them in his own kitchen. It's unusual. It is unfortunate, especially if we want to keep protecting rights of people to life. And then also, if we want to attach value to lives, it's not the best of news coming from Rwanda at this moment.
Mr. Oyenije, I know you are not a therapist, I mean, you're a lawyer, but what do you think goes on in the mind of a criminal like this, one that has committed such crime without a heart, devastating families, horrifying the rest of the world with these kind of stories?
So yes, first we are human beings, okay? And it is important for us to protect the sanctity of life. We must cherish lives. He has said that he's influenced by watching movies of serial killers. And I think that we also owe a responsibility, the things that we broadcast, whether on social media platforms or even on traditional broadcast channels. I think it's important to tone down things that have to do with violence. There are people who are career criminals and they've been influenced by what they've seen over time, what the content they have consumed. It probably also gives the responsibility to those in charge of broadcasting regarding regulations. What are the things that we should see? Okay, videos, films are censors board. What do they do about the content that is released? Nowadays, we have also content being released on digital platforms, including the Netflix of this world, the Amazon Prime and all that. But if they are shown within our borders, it is also imperative to determine what we consider as safe content. And it's important to promote good values, positive values with our media channels.
But what kind of punishment will this serial killer face? What sort of punishment awaits him?
So I also investigated. Well, thankfully, he's confessed to these crimes, even though we operate an inquisitorial system of prosecution in criminal justice in Rwanda. So what needs to be done is that he's still innocent, okay, until proven guilty. In 2007, the death penalty was abolished. So he's not likely to face the death penalty, but he's also not likely to be able to enjoy freedom for much longer. It looks like a long time behind bars, if not for the rest of his life.
I mean, such a case is not just happening. It doesn't just happen in Rwanda. We hear it even in Nigeria sometimes. But how can ordinary citizens protect themselves from being victims of such attacks?
I'll tell you that all over the world, in the West, all over the world, in fact, we have seen an increase in crime rates and some of them extremities. Even in the United Kingdom, knife crime has been on the increase in London and also even now in the East Midlands. So what we need to do, first of all, is that government and everybody, we must understand that we are in extreme situations. There are far-reaching consequences of the decisions we make, whether as a government or as a society. So the welfareism system where people just think that the government owes them all the responsibility of well-being may not totally be true. But those in public office as well should understand that they contribute primarily to insecurity. Good governance, I suspect, has a link with whether there's people enjoy the right state of mind. In fact, I am hoping that sometime in the future I'll conduct a research. People are frustrated, they are depressed. These are environmental stressors that affect the human mind. So even before we start to talk about policing and all of that, are we in sane environments? Are we in safe environments by reason of the kind of governance that we enjoy or that we have? That's number one. Number two, community policing is important. And that means that we are indeed our brother's keepers in our environment. You can't provide all the security that you need. We've seen in Nigeria, even where ministers of the gospel who are influential were attacked, and then they lost so many aides in such road attacks. All right, it's going to continue if we don't start enforcing good governance. To say the policies that government initiates must be humane in nature so that we don't drive people to extreme. We also shouldn't have welfareism that is not guarded. Okay, we must ensure that we all live responsible lifestyles. That's the only way. Prevention is the best way of dealing with such criminal extremities.
But what's the government's responsibility in cases like this or in a situation like this in terms of security and any other thing?
So the government needs to coordinate the efforts. It's almost I keep going back to Nigeria because that's a country of my birth that I love. We can't promote wealth. We can't unlock wealth except we have secured environment. People are skeptical about even investing in northern part of Nigeria as well as some parts of the southwest because you cannot guarantee security. And you cannot guarantee security without also showing in practice what you are preaching. We definitely need to cut the cost of governance. In the last administration, the coordinating person in charge of budget said 187 billion saved on governance will not move the needle. I think that individual needs to apologize to Nigerians because the mere act of cutting cost of governance will show everybody that we are all in this together, and then we can suffer for short periods for long-term gain. But if government does not lead by example, okay, by cutting cost of governance and by instituting sustainable welfare systems that are built on social enterprise, then we cannot have security. People who are angry, people who are hungry can never be tamed. It's like a waiting time bomb, and I do hope that time will come when government will be humane enough to ensure that we lead by example, and then we can have a safe society.
Mr. Eniji, I know that in the course of your career, you must have witnessed or even read about things like this, but is there a way that the ordinary citizen can recognize or find out people like this before they get to be victims of such attacks? Is there a way to know them?
What I see, first of all, and it's all about record keeping. People talk about data in a lot of times. We look at data only from the prospect of being able to account for everybody and unlock the potentials of generating wealth. But we must look at data as being a means of also making people responsible. So in Rwanda, they have their civic systems where they are registering citizens. I think that's something that needs to be revisited. Oftentimes than not, we have so many individuals who are falling in between the cracks. My own state, Lagos State, that has possibly over 20 million people at the last time. Can we account for where all of these people live, the job they do? Are we able to say that they are traceable? Until you start to have data, okay, collated and coordinated in such a manner that you can identify people, then we are all loose. And you cannot say that just by staring at somebody, you know that they have criminal tendencies. What we need to do is to provide a system where we can trace anybody at any time. Some of these may include surveillance systems, all right? In the West, you'll find people installing cameras, CCTV, and these are revisited, and they help to solve crimes. Technology, okay? I'm happy that the new Minister for Innovation and Digital Economy has said that we may have to borrow a leaf from this practice to ensure that we use technology to enforce security. It is a good thing to see, but we have to start from the ground up, which includes being able to ascertain that so is resident here at a point in time, and this is what the person does for a living. I think that will be a start.
All right. Thank you very much. Legal practitioner and international affairs analyst Yinka Oyeniji. Thanks for your time on The World Today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Still ahead on The World Today, Pilot is ready to take you anywhere you want, but that's if you're willing to entrust your flight safety into the hands of a rover. To bring you the details of this and more, please stay with us. Welcome back. Trade through Pakistan's main border crossings with Afghanistan has been severely disrupted after 2 days of closure due to the fighting between Pakistan and Afghan Taliban forces on Wednesday. The Torkham border point is the main point of transit for travelers and goods between Pakistan and landlocked Afghanistan. And on Thursday, hundreds of trucks carrying perishable goods were lining up on the Pakistan side of the border. The entire flow of trade has been affected, and loading of goods in the southern port of Karachi has been disrupted. Abdul Bashir Zabuli, a spokesman for the Taliban-led police in Afghanistan Eastern Province, where the crossing lies, said that authorities from both countries were trying to determine the reason for that clash. Disputes linked to 2,600 kilometers border had been a bone of contention between both neighbors for decades now. The UK's Justice Minister, Alex Chalk, says the country will launch an independent investigation into the escape from a London prison of a former soldier suspected of terrorism offences. 21-year-old Daniel Abed Khalifa is believed to have escaped from London's HMP Wandsworth on Wednesday morning by slipping out of the prison kitchen where he was working and then strapping himself to the bottom of a van. A major manhunt is underway to track him down with enhanced security checks at ports and even at airports, which has led to delays of passengers. Khalifa was being held in prison ahead of a trial of offences and relating to terrorism and the Official Secret Act. Opposition lawmakers have demanded answers into how he had been able to escape and why he was not being held at a maximum security prison. While there are also questions being asked about the jail staffing and their security procedures, the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has responded by saying the Justice Secretary has already initiated an internal inquiry into what the circumstances surrounding this particular incident are.
Well, the Justice Secretary has already initiated an internal inquiry into what the circumstances surrounding this particular incident. I'd just also point out there are something like 4,000 more prison officers than there were in 2017. And with regard to the Labour Party who posed the question, again, the faction...
Madam Deputy Speaker, Daniel Khalifa will be found and he will be made to face justice. I made clear then, and I reiterate now, that no stone must be left unturned in getting to the bottom of what happened. Who was on duty that morning? In what roles? Ranging from the kitchen to the prison gate. What protocols were in place? Were they followed? Second, I've ordered an investigation into the categorisation decision by HMPPS. Were all relevant matters taken into consideration in determining where in the custodial estate Daniel Khalifa should be held? In both cases, I've asked for the preliminary findings to be with me by the end of this week, and an assessment will be made then about what can properly be put into the public domain. I have also decided there will need to be an additional independent investigation into this incident, and that will take place in due course.
Meanwhile, Britain says that it will rejoin the European Union's flagship Horizon Science Research Programme, ending a 2-year post-Brexit standoff with the EU over science funding. This agreement, which excludes the EU's Euratom nuclear research scheme, signals a further improvement in bilateral relations 7 months after a dispute over trade was resolved and was welcomed by British scientists. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's office said in a statement he had secured improved financial terms of association with the Horizon project. Mr. Sunak's office said Britain would also associate with the European Earth Observation Programme, but not the EU's Euratom programme, instead choosing to pursue a domestic fusion energy strategy.
Well, it's a great day for the UK and for UK science and research community. We are associating to Horizon, which is the world's largest international research partnership, including countries not just from the EU, but also Norway, Israel, New Zealand, with hopefully Canada and South Korea to join soon too. We've taken the time to negotiate the right deal for the UK, a bespoke deal which works in our interests. And this will help maintain our leadership position as a science and tech superpower, because ultimately that's how we're going to drive growth, create jobs, spread opportunity, but most importantly, transform our lives for the better. And we've delivered a specific deal for the UK that works in the best interests of our researchers and scientists, but also in the best interest of British taxpayers. That's what we've achieved today. You can see the, as I said, overwhelming support for that. And that's because this is a great thing. This is a great thing for cementing our status as a science and research superpower. That's how we're going to drive growth in this country. That's how we're going to create jobs and spread opportunity.
Well, speaking of science, let's talk about space. And India's space agency today released images of the Earth and the Moon taken by a camera on board its spacecraft just days after it was launched to study the sun in its first such solar mission. The images, which the Indian Space Research Organization has said were taken on Monday, September the 4th, showed the Earth with a yellow arrow pointing to the position of the moon. Another image, which was the agency said was a selfie taken by the camera, showed a visible emission line coronagraph and the Suit Solar Ultraviolet Imager instruments on the spacecraft. The Aditya L1 is designed to travel 1.5 million kilometers over the period of 4 months, far short of the Sun, which is 150 million kilometers from Earth. It is meant to stop its journey in a kind of parking lot in the space called the Lagrange point, where objects tend to stay put because the balancing gravitational forces reducing fuel consumption for the spacecraft. Named after the Hindi word for the sun, the Aditya L1 spacecraft was launched on September the 2nd, barely 1 week after India beat Russia to become the first country to land on the south pole of the moon. For South Korea, the researchers have developed an advanced humanoid pilot robot called PyBot, which can understand flight manuals. It can operate the full process of flight using artificial intelligence technology. The research team, led by electrical engineering professor at Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, David Hao-cheol Shim, said the PyBot is the world's first humanoid pilot based on large language model technology that allows the robot to comprehend human pilot manuals written in general language. In emergency situations, the pilot robot can respond quickly without panic. It can even calculate safe routes, as it can recall aircraft operation manuals, quick reference handbook procedures immediately by using ChatGPT technology. For precise operation, PyBot has cameras on its face, arms, and on the front of its body. It can help identify and manipulate various switches with robotic arms and vibrating environments, and to detect the inside and outside situation of the aircraft. The robot can also memorize the entire Gibson navigation charts, which is impossible for any human pilot to do. The research team tested PyBot on a flight simulator. It performed the full process from turning of the engine, taxiing, taking off, cruising, and even landing. But the team is now working towards testing PyBot in a real-life aircraft in the next few years. All right, and finally on the program, the launch of the Lagos Rail Mass Transit highlights the importance of investing in sustainable multi-modal transportation system to help cater for the growing population. Commuters have continued to give positive remarks regarding the comfort, the price, the time of travel, and their use of the rail system. Well, Channels Television returned to the Blue Line rail terminals to see how the passengers are actually enjoying that service.
Gridlock is not unusual on the Mile 2 Oshodi Road. Beside this jam is the Mile 2 train station, the takeoff point of the Lagos Rail Mass Transit, an alternative means of transport created to reduce traffic on the roads. Passengers check in for the last train trip of the morning peak. The use of Cowrie card makes the process seamless for commuters. Those who have little information about the schedule have just missed the train. Time before the next trip is just about an hour. Notwithstanding, enthusiastic passengers can't wait to experience the new rail transport system.
So I want to wait and enter the train. I want to get the experience to enter the train because I know it will be faster. There's a lot of hold up out there. I just want to enter the train and get to where I'm going.
I'm really impressed. I cannot wait to get to that train. I cannot wait to get it.
The train eventually arrives at exactly 8:37 a.m. Passengers have just 5 minutes to get aboard. The locomotive comprises 4 compartments with over 50 passengers in each, sitting and standing. Passengers appear to be excited about the comfort that comes with riding on the Blue Line rail.
You can imagine, I just left my house not quite long, and in no distance time, maybe in 15 minutes time, I will be at my place of work.
It is affordable, it is accessible, it is reliable, it is safe, it is convenient, and we are all experiencing what transportation in a new world should look like.
The ride between the Mile 2 terminal to Marina takes about 25 minutes, with a 90-second stoppage at each of the 5 stations before the final destination. The Blue Line train service is being managed by the Lagos State Metropolitan Area Transport Authority, LAMATA, and has continued to receive commendation from most residents. However, there are concerns about the availability of power for a rail system run by electricity, especially in a climate where public power supply is epileptic. So what are the alternative sources of power? During a tour of the facilities days before the launch, the managing director of LAMATA attempted to provide answers to these questions and others regarding the safety and maintenance of the infrastructure.
We have been very meticulous in ensuring that all the issues are dealt with, including the provision of the power, health and safety, operational modalities to ensure the safety of all of our passengers.
The partial passenger operations covers the morning peak hours from 6:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. and evening peak from 4 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. These operations are starting with 12 trips, to be increased to 76 trips per day.
Well, anything to make your world easier, it will always be welcome. And that's it on The World Today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne.